and bring the noise.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bring the Noise podcast. This one really happened in a weird way. I've been down in London for about 4 or 5 days now, and I've done about 4 different podcasts with 4 different people. And last night I'm in the garage. And, I'm just getting food for myself. And then all of a sudden I turn round and there's a man standing behind me and his name's Jon Wedger. And I'm sitting there going, I can't believe that this guy's standing behind me, because you were someone on my list that I think I wanted to talk to. Obviously I've seen a lot of the stuff you've been speaking about, Jon. And for me, I think the times that we're in just now is very scary, and I think a lot of stuff is quite interlinked, to be honest with you. And like I said, mate, you're always somebody I thought, you know what, maybe one day I will speak to you. But, last night we had a small conversation.
Well, the thing is, I usually go to a garage, a Tesco's garage, about a mile away, and I thought, no, I'll go there. Because if I need to get some food or something, because it's a Marks and Spencer's one, it's all right then, and you can actually go in the garage. So I thought, no, I'll just go to that one, fill up, and then I'll be home. And that's right. Well, look, God's timing is perfect. His timing is perfect, and of course, we made arrangements, and here we are now. Right in the heart of London.
Yeah, very last minute. Like I said, I'm not even prepared for this one. I thought, you know what, because you never know, if you're up in Scotland again, we might do it again. But I thought, you know what, take your number, see if we can do this last minute. But sometimes the last minute ones are always the best.
Well, it's the same as artists when they write songs. The things that come to their mind out of nothing tend to be the ones that stick. It gets driven, and there's a purpose behind it. But you're right in what you say. We're in very, very strange times, and I think if anyone doesn't think that there is a spiritual element to this, whether it's negative or positive, pushing us in a certain direction, they're wrong, because we are in very, very changing spiritual time.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've done over 100 podcasts, mate. Like I said, I'm just a guy who's very curious about things. One of the reasons I've done my podcast is because we've both been on a certain guy's podcast, certain Scottish guy. I won't name him, but we know who he is. He's a good guy. I've got nothing against the guy. Great guy, does fantastic. He was one of the biggest podcasters in the UK. I went on his podcast in 2022, I think it was. Myself and my friend Alex Mitchell. It was either 2022 or 2023, I can't remember. Very early on, and it was the one and only podcast they couldn't put on YouTube. For 2 men who took an experimental jag and were crippled by it. Like I said, where you see me now, Jon, to where I was is an absolute walking miracle, if I'm being honest with you. 45 grand spent to try and get my life back. And when James told me that, he says, look, it's the one, and he says, I can't put it up. He says, you guys are a big threat to my channel. And at that point, we were quite deflated, because we thought, you know what, we're going to break the narrative. We're going to help save a lot of people here from getting harmed from these things, warning people about the possible side effects to them, because like I said, Alex has had a leg amputated. And when James said that he couldn't put it on YouTube, it was very disheartening. And for me, I thought, well, you know what, if he can't touch us, mainstream media aren't going to touch us, then who's going to touch us? And then I said, well, you know what, I might as well try and do my own podcast to try and bring the noise.
It's the only way. I mean, I suffered the same. When I first started speaking out about what happened to me, the mainstream media, they didn't want to touch me. And then an offer was made to me, because I was working alongside victims and survivors of historic, institutional, systemic child abuse. And many of them have been in and out of prison. And an offer was made to me, especially there was one main campaigner, a guy called Bill Maloney. And he was very, very vocal, very animated, very driven, very tough guy. And they were frightened of him, because he would actually take the fight into Parliament. He would actually go up to politicians and he'd front them. He fronted Nick Clegg once, face to face, a real man, about the cover-ups of the child abuse. And they said to me, stay away from him And politicians said the same. If you stay away from him, we can give you a media contract. And I refuse to do it. But do you know what is really upsetting? What you've just told me, and again, the guy's got a livelihood and he must maintain that. And anyone who doesn't, that could be deemed as foolish. But what does society value? If you look on TikTok now, on the social media that is TikTok, there's one video that I watched and it had 8.3 million views, and it was a girl who goes by the name of Bonnie Blue, right? She's a self-proclaimed porn actress, and she's attempting to break some sort of record in shagging 1,000 men in a 24-hour period. 8.3 million people watch this disgusting piece of nonsense. There's no value on what she's doing whatsoever, and 8.3 million people watched it. And not only did they watch it, it was allowed to stay on.
Yeah.
I mean, and what an influence is.
I think to give you a quick example. So I think it was like last week. This will take me a long time to edit this, so hopefully I can get out. You know, I've got lots of podcasts about, but I will be putting this out. I think what we're dealing with just now is we're dealing with a lot of mental health issues in regards. I mean, to give you I was on a live, you know, these people do lives on TikTok, and I do lives to try and, you know, find others and trying to tell people about my story, because this is the biggest medical scandal in history. And, you know, I go on and I'm sitting there, and sometimes I'll get like 50 people in the live, 100 people. Now, I come on the live, there's this young girl, I think she's from Liverpool, and she's just pissed drunk. Don't want to say too much about her, but it was clear as day she was unhinged. Yeah. And she's dancing about her kitchen. Next minute, my views went from about 80 people in my live, 750 within 2 minutes, and I'm sitting going, this is incredible. Like, here's someone here like myself that's trying to use the platform to raise awareness, speak about very, very, people might say it's controversial. Some podcasts I've got are going to be very controversial. But for me, I'm trying to warn people. I'm trying to use the platform for good. I was never a social media guy before, but here we are where this young girl will be getting funded because they get lots of money. They get these people who subscribe to them. And I'm sitting going, this is crazy.
Well, years ago, our only source of entertainment and education when it comes to media devices was the television. And we had programs like World in Action and Panorama and things like the Cook Report. And they would be on really interesting adult topics. So where you're coming from in standing up and exposing, you know, the pharmaceutical industry and a bigger government conspiracy here, really, and I think it's a very, very sinister one, because conspiracy is not a bad word. It's in statute law. 2 or more people can get together for a criminal cause. It's a conspiracy, as long as they're not husband and wife. So it exists. They do go on. But when they would advertise it on Panorama this week, and maybe something like a big medical issue like this. There was one about the Bhopal disaster in India, where a chemical plant wasn't maintained properly, Union Carbide it was, and it blew up and it poisoned the whole village. And they did a Panorama program on it, and it got millions and millions of people were outraged by it, right? But now you've got guys like that #, Brady. I'm not knocking him, and good luck to him, but he looks like a guy who didn't do too well at school, you know, a bit of a joke and whatever. And he's a TikTok sensation because all he does is shovel crap food down his guts. He'll get a fried egg and eat it with his hands, and then he'll eat a hot dog, and then he'll down a pint of Guinness. And he's making, the last thing he said, he was making about £40,000 a month just eating shit, crap.
Yeah, I mean,
and people watch it.
I know. Like I said, I was watching this TikTok. Again, there's like little stupid ones. Like, there's a guy that strips an egg. There's 1.4 1,400 people watching this guy strip an egg. He's just taking the eggshell off an egg, you know, and with like little tweezers.
I don't mind watching
ASMR.
the guy who makes stuff out of chocolate.
Yeah.
He's good. He makes
Right, I've not, but it's like okay, we'll get rid of Jeremy Kyle, so let's put them all into fucking TikTok.
It is. It's just weird. It's a weird sort of porn that they watch now. And Jeremy Kyle is a freak show.
It was, yeah.
It's entertainment in dysfunctionality. It's absolutely horrendous. But I mean, my medium was a child abuse and trying to get it out there. And again, no one's interested. And when you talk about child abuse, it affects so much of society, and it's really the root cause of much of society's ills. But if you was to talk in a public forum about it, people go, no, please, don't talk about it. Please, not here, don't. They don't want to know. Now, again, you struggle sometimes to get the views, and other times the views come, in buckets. But a few years ago, there was some footage, and maybe it came from a doorbell or something, I can't remember, but it made the news, and it was of a woman walking down an English street in some sort of city suburb, and there's a wheelie bin. And next to the wheelie bin is a cat just walking along, and she picks up the cat and she chucks it in the wheelie bin, right? Millions of people were outraged, right? She had to be moved by the police for her own protection because there was so much outrage. There were death threats against her. Her life was at risk because she chucked a cat in a bin. The cat didn't die. Maybe the cat enjoyed it. Who knows? We don't know. But the British public was absolutely...
I remember it.
But the child abuse stuff, no one cares. And again, when we get on to the topic you're on about, when it first came out, that we're going to need to potentially lock down and socially distance, the one thing the government turned around and said, they said, we're doing this, right, to protect the elderly. Now, I knew straight away when they said that it was a joke because they don't give a toss for the elderly. The elderly were starving and freezing to death, right? They took away their cold winter payments. They took so much away from them, the pension they mucked around and everything. They don't give a flying thought for the elderly, and they don't care for the children either. We're seeing 6, 7-year-old kids with fat guts that you'd get on a beer drinking man doing about 20 pints a night. So overweight, they're going to suffer. We are going to see probably the worst health threat ever when these kids start getting diabetes in their 20s and potentially dying from heart attacks, cardio failure, and diabetes-related issues, right? You've got shops, parades of shops, that you'll get pizzas, kebabs, chippies, all in a row. We've always had chip shops because that's the UK, but all this junk, high in salt, high in fat, total and utter junk. There used to be a rule that they couldn't have these shops less than a mile away from a school because it would encourage kids to go there and eat. But now they're absolutely everywhere. Why is the government not sanctioning that? They don't care. They just don't care. So I knew at that point it was a lie. And then what came with it was all the restrictions not to talk about it. And it's the same with the child abuse. The parallels are so thick. We couldn't talk about it. We're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to make these allegations. And if we do, you get shut down.
What somebody said to me, actually, and I'm going to try and get him on the podcast, he's in Scotland. He actually turned around to me. Now, I'm not sitting trying to compare me to someone that's had been abused as a child, but what he's saying is very similar what you guys are experiencing. And what he means by that is, what they say is, a child is trying to go up to the adult and say, look, I've been abused, and the adults don't talk nonsense and they don't believe them. And they said, this is very similar to what you guys are experiencing. You're telling the government, or you've been injured from this thing that you have pushed onto everybody, and everybody's turned their back on you, mainstream media, government, health professionals, everybody, and that the level of silence and gaslighting that we've experienced people like me is ridiculous, and I'm pretty sure it's the exact same with the children.
It's exactly the same. Years ago, there was a guy called David Bellamy, and he was like a botanist or something like that. He was a professor, and he was an expert on wildlife and flora, plants, and everything else. And he was always on the TV throughout the 70s and the 80s, especially when it comes to nature programs and kids programs. That very, very learned guy. And he turned around when they were started really forcing the green agenda, the greenhouse gas and everything. And I want to come on about this in a minute because I think we're seeing parallels here. He turned around and said this rise and fall of temperature is natural. It's to do with the sun. It's to do with solar flares. Right? And he was qualified to say that. The next day, he was removed by the BBC. Removed. Now, we see this all the time when people start really, really speaking out. And when I was growing up, they turned around and they said to us that the Russians in the 70s, the Russians are going to bomb us with nuclear bombs. So they started putting these public information films out. One was called When the Wind Blows. It was a cartoon by Raymond Briggs, who did The Snowman. Walking in the Air, that song. And it was all about this couple that were trying to come to some sort of understanding of the 3-minute warning, which they said they'd give us a 3-minute warning and then the bombs would hit us, kill us all. And in schools, they were teaching us to go under desks if this siren went off and all that. It was a lie. And at the same time, they were saying that the Russians were starving, that they had to queue up for a week to get a loaf of bread. Countries like Latvia and Lithuania were the same. And years later, I ended up, in the 90s, I ended up going to Lithuania. And I said to one guy, look, they used to tell us that you guys were starving and you guys had no food. And anyone who ever goes out to these countries, you know, especially Lithuania, their minimum height is about 6'7". They're massive and they're fit and they're strong. And he said to us, look, do we look like we're starving? Because we get fed nonsense. Then they turned around to us and said, acid rain. Acid rain, because of global warming and the toxicity through fumes and all that, is causing acidity in the clouds. And they showed photographs of Scandinavian lakes, Sweden, Finland, that part of the world. And they showed all these fish dead. And they said, all the fish in Scandinavia are dying. And the bark's being stripped off the trees. And there'll be no fish left in another year unless we stop it, right, the acid rain. And they said that the Houses of Parliament, because it's made of sandstone, in about 2 years, it will dissolve. And then it was a rise in sea levels. And they said by 2020, London will be under 10 metres of water. Prince Charles said this. Well, it hasn't altered at all. It hasn't altered 1 inch, whether it goes up or down. They turned around and then said that the rainforest, unless we do something about it, that land mass the size of Wales is ploughed slashed and burnt, ploughed over every single day. Within a few years, there will be no rainforest. The other month, a guy flew over, he did some documentary, he flew over in a plane over the rainforest, and he was in the air for something like 6 hours. He started over rainforests, he landed over rainforest for 6 hours in a straight line in an aeroplane, pure rainforest. It's still there. It's a lie. It's a lie. They've lied to us about every single element that they push forward as a risk, that this is going to happen. The Russians are going to kill us. These people are there was one, because I had a career in the police, in about 2003, a lot of East Europeans were coming over, Polish and Lithuanians. So they said that the Lithuanians are the biggest forgers of money. If Lithuania goes to the euro, they'll be forging so much euro notes, high value, that the economy of Europe will collapse. And they're the biggest procurer of firearms and prostitution. And they're going to bring the United Kingdom to its knees. Now, the majority of Lithuanians who came over, and Polish and Latvians, came over here to work. And that was it. Then, a couple of years later, it's because I was a detective at the time in Vice, and this was the intel they were passing. They then said the Romanians are coming, and the Romanians are mainly a gypsy race. And this was police intelligence coming from Europol, apparently, and that one of the biggest revenue streams is the stealing of children, right, from families and selling them within the Roma gypsy community. the majority of Romanians came over here to do groundwork, screeding, block work, plastering, not to steal children. And all it does is push the fear, pump the fear, push the fear. So we see it all the time, this narrative, this fluidity of it all.
Yeah.
That I'm going to say there's something really, really interesting. And I was told once, watch a documentary, and I would advise anyone who questions or even believes the official government narrative to watch this documentary called The Berlin to Baghdad Railway. And after I watched that, it actually changed my whole belief system. And what it's about was the official narrative of the First World War was that Archduke Ferdinand of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was shot, and it caused this backlash, knee-jerk reaction, which ended up in millions, hundreds of millions of young men being slaughtered needlessly, right? Now, no one person, bar Jesus Christ, is that important. And Archduke Ferdinand is not worth the massacre of millions and millions of young men. So it was a lie, that. And what this documentary goes on about was that the Germans were, and they are, the benchmark of German design and German industry and everything is so high, it's copied mainly throughout Eastern Europe. And that's why they've got such good machinery. Anyone who's owned a German car knows, or a German washing machine, that they're bang on, they're good. Mm-hmm. Now, there were sanctions on them, and Winston Churchill had something to do with the Navy during the First World War, and everyone thinks he's some sort of superhero, but he screwed up every job he was given. He weren't a clean man. Someone told me Winston Churchill had a saying that all good evenings must end in sodomy. His mother died of syphilis because she was seen as the whore of the aristocracy. They reckon she shagged near enough every single monarch in Europe. His father was just as dysfunctional, and he was the same. He was meant to be useless at every job he's given. So how all of a sudden they think he's saved the world, God knows how to come to that conclusion. But you've just got to break it down. And my opinion gets moulded by the fact that I was a detective and I saw things in a very raw form. And as well as when there's certain films I won't watch, I can't watch, because I know from my investigations and my colleagues that were involved in complex and serious sexual offences, some of which were highly sensitive, that there's so many, and we're seeing it now in the entertainment industry, that aren't just perverts, they're paedophiles, and some of them are devil worshippers, right? And I'll get to that, but if I can just, without domineering it too much, because I just want to make a point about the narrative, the Berlin to Baghdad Railway, so the Germans couldn't have access to too much coal. We've got the best coal in the world. We've got 300 years of high-grade anthracite under our soil, in our seams in the UK. The best coal in England, Wales and Scotland, right? We have no need for a fuel crisis. We've got it. They've got power stations that burn clean now, and our coal is better than the Polish coal, it's better than the Chinese coal, which are the ones that import it to us, and they shut down our mines. And so the Germans were struggling, and they linked in with the Ottomans, the Ottoman Empire. I don't know whether it was Ataturk or whoever was in charge of the Ottoman Empire throughout the beginning of the 19th century, the 1900s. And they found in Kirkuk in Iraq, they found oil. And they realised if you refine this stuff and you burn it, it's good going, you know. You can get engines that are so much more efficient, and they can be lighter than coal engines, and they don't need refilling as much. So the boats, you know, we had coal boats, our Navy were all coal driven, and they were hard work, whereas combustion engines, you know, diesel engines and everything else, they're not, they're bang on. So they come up with this agreement, the Ottomans and the Germans, to build a railway line that went from Berlin in the north, under the Germanic rule, and under the Ottoman rule in Baghdad in the south. And they smashed on with it. They got 60 miles away from each other, just outside of Syria. They were that close, a year away from bridging that, and that would have pushed Germany into this industrial economic powerhouse, the likes of which we'd probably never see. Of course, Churchill couldn't have it. So they sent the 1st Battalion of the Dorset Regiment in to blow that up. And that now forms most of the Orient Express route, right? That's what the Orient Express runs on now. And that's what caused the war. So it was nothing. And when I hear that, as a detective, I'm thinking, that makes sense. That makes sense, right? And when I heard, like with the COVID, with the narrative, it didn't make sense. It didn't. But when you look at the backlash, it has screwed society. It has ruined our economy. It has destroyed mental health. It has caused division in families. And if the toxins that were injected are what people have said, it's probably going to cause sterility.
Well, talking about that and the ramifications of these things, we've seen an increase in stillbirths. We've seen an increase in miscarriages. Like I say, I know people who have had miscarriages. The nurses and doctors are now going, what's going on here? You know, they're getting these strange pregnancies. And like I say, Dr. John Campbell's a man that I know, and he's covered these things in regards to these jags. I call them jags because the censorship's too much on here. But yeah, man, it's scary what it's done. And there's been people reach out to me and say, John, I've got a wee one, and they've got this very strange disability, and I took mine when I was pregnant. And I say, I can't 100% say yes or no, but there's been a definite increase.
Well, I'll grow up. Well, I'm in my mid-50s now. In a few years, I'll be 60. And when I grew up in an area where it was a housing estate, and there was kids everywhere. And on average, families had 3 children. The Irish tended to have 5, but the English tended to have 3 children. But our parents came from bigger families, usually of 5 or 6. But our grandparents came from 12 or 13. Now no one has children. Now, if I'm going to be theologically conspiratorial here, if I was going to say that the devil's plan is to attack what is most precious to God, and that's the children, then it's going the right way. In order to maintain a society, you have to have 2.4 children. That is the golden ratio for a society to keep going. We're on 0.6 in this country. Now, they've done that many ways, and one of the ways they've done it is by putting house prices up so high, especially in this area. Our children, especially Londoners, their kids will never, ever own a house, never. And that has happened since the late 80s, early 90s, when the house prices in this area skyrocketed. When the rest of the country was still very cheap and affordable, London and the home counties, they went through the roof. But everyone was rubbing their hands together, a bit like the Spanish farmers on the costas. But it will only last so long. And that bubble's burst. And everything is now caught up, and no one can afford to buy a house, and no one can afford to live. We can't afford to live. So more and more people are staying at home. And if couples get together, both of them have to work. So that for the first time ever, women have to go to work, when before a mother could stay at home and look after the kids. No matter what your income or what your job was, you could afford to pay off your mortgage in your working lifetime. Jobs were pretty much secure, and you could have a 2-week holiday. That was the benchmark. Yeah. Now that's only for the privileged now. The privileged and the corrupt can only do that. So children, unless it's migrants, right, indigenous people aren't having kids. So in the next 30 years, we're going to be in serious trouble. And 30 years goes quick. You know, it's nearly, since all this nonsense started, it's nearly 10 years on since that. So it doesn't take long. And then if these jags have gone on to cause sterility and caused adult men not to produce the right amount of sperm, or women not to ovulate, then we're not going to have any kids.
There's women get into menopause very early. There's so many. The level of side effects to these things, there's documentation from one of the pharmaceutical companies that was released under a Freedom of Information Act. They try to hide it for 75 years, and it's pages upon pages, mate, and it's ridiculous.
But what annoys me was when you've got actors like Ray Winston and Barbara Windsor and people like that are pushing the vaccines, but also them two were pushing things like online bingo. As if people aren't skint enough, and with the thought of winning money, that they're pushing this cheap form of gambling, which is causing addiction. Shame on them. And then there were so many actors as well, and footballers were ridiculing people that weren't getting the vaccine, weren't getting this, weren't getting that. They've totally and utterly sold their souls. One of the things that concerns me was that when we were growing up, you always had grandparents, right? And they were always quite sharp, the old people. They physically couldn't do much, but up there, they were on it. All the old now, they got Alzheimer's. We were either dying of cancer. When I was growing up, 1 in 50, they said, are getting cancer. No, you didn't really know anyone with cancer. It was like, you didn't know much about it. You actually thought it was contagious. Yeah. But now, everyone seems to get cancer. And the old also all get Alzheimer's. Everyone's getting Alzheimer's.
It's not even that. You're not just getting regular cancers now, you're getting these aggressive cancers. And as an oncologist, Dr. John Campbell again, he's covered, Professor Angus Dalgleish, he spoke about these things in videos. People who are getting, I tell this story before, I've told this story before. There's a woman I know, her sister went into hospital on the Friday, discovered she had cancer, gone by the Monday. Like, so aggressive. And one of the reasons I know that this could possibly happen is at one point I went into hospital and they took my bloods, and at one point my white blood cells were like the lowest they'd ever been, and that's basically what fights off, that's what protects you, the white cells, and my white cells were literally nothing. Now if I had a cancer in my body, there's no way in hell my body would have been able to fight it. So that makes a lot of sense to me when I hear all these things, and it really is a harsh reality of what's happened. And I'd love to sit here and say, oh, this is misinformation, but it's not, because when you hear stories and you're hearing from the common people on the street and you're hearing all these things, what else am I meant to believe?
Look what they were telling us. We saw the same footage every single day, right? I was watching the news. And people say, I don't want to watch the news. I think it's important to be abreast of current affairs. Know your enemy. Know the world around you. Know what's going on geopolitically and know what's going on domestically. Do not sit there watching Strictly Come Doing This and Celebrity whatever, because it's dumbing down your mind. It's taking you away from the focus. They were showing during the pandemic times, it was the same footage all the time, and it was of a warehouse in Spain, some sort of refrigerated warehouse, and they showed this van backing up, and they said more bodies are coming in. It was the same footage, every single day, same footage. And when they showed a graph of the death toll, instead of being impartial and sticking to factual evidence, they didn't just have a graph. What they did, it was a black background with red ink, like the most sinister thing, like Dracula's done it, and it was peaking up like it was going up to Mount Everest, the death toll, and it was so sinister because it was black with red. I'm thinking, how are they allowed to get away with this? My colleague I was in the police with, he left the police, he retired, a decent guy, no need to lie, he become an undertaker's assistant, and he said, it's so quiet. He said, they're saying the death toll's going through the roof. He said, John, the death toll is dropping, not right.
In 2020, during the pandemic?
It's a lie. It's a total lie. Mm-hmm. And he's a copper, and he told me, he was going, we've never been so quiet. And all of a sudden, terrorism, Islamic terrorism, died. The virus tend to kill terrorism. It killed cancer because no one was getting cancer during that time.
But they weren't getting cancer treatment either.
They weren't getting anything.
No.
You know, and people were buying it. And I'm thinking, can't you wake up? It's a massive. One of the best things you can do when you're sick: sunlight and exercise. Sunlight and exercise. And telling us to stay in, and they were putting these public information films out of what the virus looked like. No one even knew what it looked like. And they showed it floating around in a house, bouncing into people, and then going out of a window when someone opened it. And they said, please open your window, let the virus out. Like it worked on convection currents. And I couldn't believe that people actually were buying it. And then they said, dogs carry it. So if you walk your dog, you're spreading it. And again, people were buying it. Having been a child abuse detective and worked on what's called the referrals area, the referrals desk, when we would get referrals in of suspicion or allegations that kids were being abused, right? A lot of the times that neighbours wouldn't say anything because it wasn't their place to say anything, despite hearing kids screaming at night, mothers screaming, everything else, say nothing. Yet then people found the gumption to report their neighbour for walking their dog twice. But they wouldn't report the kids that were being abused next door. And I found it so sad what it did to society. It really, really upset me. And I was at every single anti-lockdown protest. I went out on the street. I refused to wear a mask. I wouldn't do it. I just was not going to even go there with it.
I mean, I talk about that. I mean, I don't even know if I'll be able to put that. This is probably the most censored thing to talk about, to be honest with you. I know what you talk about is really, it doesn't seem that it's censored, what you're talking about, but it's kind of like the world is desensitising themselves from child abuse. Like, I don't know if they don't think it's something that happens. I don't know why everybody isn't in an uproar about it. Maybe it's the same as the Jags, you know, because it hasn't affected them or it hasn't affected their children. Again, we get it all the time. Well, I took it, I'm fine, you know.
What we got to look at with child abuse is the damage it does to society. And when it comes to policing, what are people worried about? You know, antisocial behaviour, people snatching mobile phones with these e-bikes and things like that now. And so it's real rudimentary base level stuff, but they're not really getting to the heart of it. 80% of under 25s within the lower category prisons in the UK have come from child abuse backgrounds, right? 80% of them kids are base level illiterate. So there's a massive failing of our kids, and 80% of them will reoffend. Child abuse is at the core of so much. Everyone knows an angry person, and I'm telling you now, whether they admit to it or not, anger is trauma. Anger is trauma. Heroin addiction. So many people that are addicted to heroin and use of heroin have come from not just abuse, but sexual abuse. Heroin is an analgesic, it's a painkiller. And when someone's been abused, what it does is physically you can carry on living. And actually, you can achieve quite a lot physically. Intellectually, you can carry on. So we're made up of three components: with the physical self, the intellectual self, and the emotional self. Okay, I know there's a spiritual side. We're not going to go there for this argument. So when someone has been sexually abused as a child, and sexual abuse, on a conservative estimate affects a third of our population. So it's the single biggest threat. It will be behind excessive drinking. It will be behind domestic violence. So perpetrators of domestic violence have come from abandonment and rejection issues. There'll be an anger towards a woman because the lioness hasn't protected the cubs. Alcoholism, anger, violence, drug addiction, so much we can attribute to it. But people will sit there and they won't believe someone's been sexually abused because they say, well, they're doing quite well. There was an interesting BBC documentary about elite special forces, and they spoke to 5 soldiers that were in these special force regiments. And out of the 5, 3 of them have come from sexual abuse childhood backgrounds. So there's a need to show the world. There will be quite a lot of people that are in violent contact sports that have come from, no one will ever hurt me like I've been hurt, right? And again, when it comes to intelligence, there's a need to show the world what they are, because they've always been told, shut up, you're stupid, you're no good, you're no this, right? And they can carry on and achieve, but emotionally they can't. We are reasoning as reasonable adults because our emotional self has been allowed to mature. When you've been abused as a kid, your emotional clock stops. And if that's at 5, then you've got the emotional maturity of a 5-year-old. Now that's dangerous when you become an adult, because if someone doesn't do what you want, what does a 5-year-old do? It relies on petulance. I hate you. How many people do we know do that? Mm-hmm. When there's an argument, I hate you. Why don't you die? Why didn't you? Road rage. I get it a lot because I speak.
Well, so you think that? So you think a lot of people's behaviour is because of that, because of that age?
Abuse,
That's when the trauma happened, and they've kind of never evolved from that.
No, and the value system as well. So when you look at, I was a specialist interrogator for many years. I ended up doing profiling and all sorts. So I wouldn't say that I was to any phenomenal level, but it was to a good enough level. And I went on to a special Scotland Yard unit where we would train quite elite units within the police how to interrogate, right? And part of that would be to down with profiling body language, but also we'd look at people's value system, especially when someone's making no comment and things like that. We'd look at what they would value and what would trigger them. So if someone had a very immature value system, you knew that that was a broken person. So if they liked, like a grown man seeing like a really nice flash car going, wow, which is okay, I've got nothing wrong with that, but it's more befitting of a teenage boy than it is of an adult, right? And these indicators like that, it's not a catch-all, but it is an indicator that you might be dealing with someone with a low level of emotional maturity. And that would be an inner for us to identify it and to attack them. Okay. Now, most child abusers have been abused themselves. Mm-hmm. They know what it's like. I'm not saying that those that have been abused go on to abuse. I'm not saying that.
No.
And you also get a hypervigilance with survivors, so they will recognise a paedophile a mile off where other people don't. But there's other things that will go on which can cause them a lot of problems in life. They will see control in everything, right? And sometimes they will have a need to control because control's been taken away from them, which would then lead them dangerously towards being a perpetrator of domestic violence and things like that, you know. And
what do you mean, like goading people into?
Yeah. Well, because if you've had no control in your life, you will have a need to take control and assert control. And people who perpetrate domestic violence can be very cruel, do some horrible things and terrible controlling things. So they'll, for example, if it's a man against a woman, checking their phone every 5 minutes, smelling them when they come home, and horrible, making their lives a misery because they're cruel, because they've been exposed to cruelty. Yeah. And it might be they met it out towards a woman because there's an anger with their mother, because their mother allowed them to be hurt when she should have protected them. One of the things which allows a child to be abused 30 times greater than a child in a stable, loving family relationship is the presence of a step-parent. And that shocks people. And it might even anger some people, because I was a step-parent and I had a step-parent and I wasn't abused, and I never ever would even consider abusing my own kids, but there are many that do.
Oh, were you abused, John? I didn't know that.
No, not at all. No. So I wasn't,
right.
But there's many that were, by a step-parent. So it's an indicator of what's going on. And there's a very sad thing as well, because I've interviewed, not just in the police, but subsequently in my podcasts and the things I do, survivors of abuse, in order to tell the world. Abuse can conjure up things like F off, you tosser or whatever. That's abusive behaviour. What we're talking about is serious sexual assaults on a child. Horrific assaults, bestiality, violence combined with it, horrific things. And that totally distorts that poor, vulnerable person's mind.
Yeah.
And it's bringing it out. But there's one of the things that I noticed when I was in the police. One guy, we interviewed him once, and he just burst into tears, and he was telling us about his childhood. He's a grown man now, and he would be abused at home by his father and by an uncle, and he would be seriously sexually assaulted. And the R word, as we say on YouTube, over a long period of time. Now, a young boy's body is not built for a grown man's penis. Let's get it right. It's not meant to, well, an anus is not meant to take a penis anyway. And I don't care what the diversity stakes say, it isn't. And I want to, physiologically, and I want to explain that, right? A vagina... not that I'm a gynecologist or anything like that, but a vagina is a wall of muscles that is designed by God for a purpose, that it will harbour life and it will allow a penis to do its job, and then it will stretch and harbour life and protect life, and then it will expel the child, and then it will go back. And I know there will be some muscle stretching, but women, as we know from our grandparents, used to have 20 kids, some of them. And it wasn't uncommon a few generations ago. My grandmother was one of 12. So it does its job. An anus is not a vagina. It's what's called a sphincter muscle. It is a chain that forms a hoop. And when that is violated, they break. They might look wholesome and circular, but it ain't doing its job. It will leak. And it is designed to be airtight. And once sodomy on a young child takes place by an adult, it damages it to such a degree that those little rings break. And I was getting grown men crying and just saying, I go to work, I work in an office, this guy in particular, and I smell and I leak shite and I get embarrassed. And it's awful, and I've done nothing wrong, and my heart felt for this guy. But he wasn't alone. It was an account we heard time and time again. And I thought that it was prudent that the world needs to know that when a child is abused, they don't just get a little bit angry and it's a life experience and it makes them tough. It ruins their soul. It fractures their soul. 3 generations of that family will be affected. There is a greater chance they will fail to protect. A girl that has been sexually abused is at risk of failing to protect her own baby. That's why they put in care orders on some of these pregnant mums that have been abused, because they know there will be a failure to protect their kids. They will make poor life choices. They will have a distorted opinion of and feeling of what sex is. It wouldn't be a loving, caring act between consensual people. It can be something that is hurtful, painful, dangerous, and can be a weapon. And all these other things that it does, anger, torment with men, a demasculation, a need to overcompensate, twisted cognitive distortion, and put so many at risk of offending themselves, right? And this is what the world needs to know, but they don't want to know it. And I had a guy, I put this out there, and I'm here for the survivors and for the victims. And I spent most of my career fighting those who hurt them, and I risked imprisonment and the loss of my children and much more. And there was a risk to my life at one point in speaking out about the deliberate cover-up by the government of what really goes on in our children's homes and on the street and everywhere else, in which children are abused and are murdered, right? And that isn't even discussing the satanic ritual abuse side, which is real, which is very, very real. So I'm there for them. But the world needs to wake up, like your topic, that this is a reality. And the other thing is, unlike crime in general, which tends to be crimes of violence and crimes of dishonesty, and on housing estates, right? And I'm not digging out the working in the lower classes. I'm saying it as it is, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're intelligent people here. We need to face facts. You don't get street robberies and people going into pubs and punching the hell out of them in posh areas on the whole. You don't get that. Sexual crime, you do. Because sexual crime doesn't know any boundaries, any barriers, because it is on every single religion, it's on every single economic background, it is the most diverse. And also, it doesn't discriminate. Whereas other crime does discriminate. It tends to be the reserve of the lower and the working classes, but it's where they want to cover it up. And it is the weakness in a lot of people. And especially when you get the upper classes and the ruling classes that have been placed as children, divested from their motherly love, if they ever had any, put into these preparatory boarding schools where they are whipped, caned and buggered. And that came out in the official inquiry, not just in the UK, but recently in the Scottish National Inquiry that came out, in care homes such as Fornethi and many others, where it was endemic. And there's one called Loretto in Lorette College or school in Scotland, where their version, your version of Eton, and they found that young boys weren't just caned and buggered by teachers and other pupils, which creates a conspiracy of silence and makes pupils not want to speak out because they've been through it, and then they give it out as well. Bear in mind, young men have testosterone. And once you've got that twisted, perverted, cognitive thought process regarding sex, and it was done to you, and therefore you do it to the younger boys, which is called the fagging system, which was totally and utterly endemic within the the schooling, then they go on to do it, and it gets covered up. So you've got these young boys that end up in these very high fee-paying schools, such as Eton and Winchester, and of course in Loretto in Scotland. And there was a guy called Nicholas Fairbairn, who went on to become in Scotland the highest level of barrister you can, which is called the Advocate Depute. He was in charge of the PF, which is a Procurator Fiscal in Scotland. And he was like a laird, He was an estate owner, had this big estate. I think he even had his own whiskey. And he was in charge of all the major child abuse investigations in Scotland that ended up before the Procurator Fiscal. His girlfriend at the time, bear in mind he was a paedophile and he was into girls and boys. His unofficial girlfriend, he was having an affair with Esther Ransom. Esther Ransom set up Childline, along with Jimmy Savile and Pedos Anonymous, Team Pedo, all together, PDF file, as we say. And he was going in with another well-known barrister called Bob Henderson. And Bob Henderson was involved in a rent boy racket in Edinburgh, in which a young boy was murdered. And it was covered up in what they call the magic circle. And it was a team of paedophilic barristers within the elite of the Edinburgh law circle, right? These two were going in to, and both ended up, being accused and convicted of offences against children. They both ended up going into a care home for maladjusted and girls in respite care in Perthshire called Fornethi. And I think out of 20 girls interviewed, 15 of them pointed out Nicholas Fairbairn as being their abuser. He was back then what's termed a QC, a Queen's Counsel. And these are people that end up as our decision makers in Parliament. And they end up high up. So if we think there's going to be justice regarding child abuse and the abuse of children, we need to know the truth. And then the intelligence services get involved. Because once someone is known to be an abuser, especially in the political world, they can be blackmailed. And if someone is at risk of blackmail, it means that politically that can cause an influence by the other side. And therefore the intelligence services, the military intelligence, MI5 and MI6 get involved.
I want to go back to you saying about Esther. So she was involved with setting up, what was it? Childline.
Yeah.
And you said she was having an affair with this guy?
Yeah. He was a paedophile.
And
for 10 years, she had an affair with Nicholas Fairbairn.
Is this documented?
Yeah, it's documented, yeah.
And would that be help fuel his sick way?
Well, let's look at what he potentially could have had access to.
Yeah.
All right. How many kids rang up Childline? We will never know.
Yeah.
But it was set up as a helpline, a lifeline for kids that are being abused. Let me tell you something, that I worked in probably one of the busiest child abuse offices in the country, in one of the most impoverished inner city areas in London. And when I was there, the years I served there, we had hundreds, maybe thousands of referrals of children being seriously abused. When I was there, only 2 came from Childline. So where were all the others going? Where were they going? And there was a group that was annexed, that was attached to the Labour Party throughout the 70s and the 80s, called PI, Paedophile Information Exchange. And it was a lobbyist group, a left-wing Labour Party lobbyist group, made up really of perverts and PDF files. And they wanted the age of consent between a man and a boy to be lowered to 8 years old, and a man and a girl to be lowered to 14. And that had the approval of 3 female senior, longest-serving MPs, and that was Harriet Harman, Margaret Hodge and Patricia Hewitt. And they all went on to become right honourables, which were privy councillors, which were appointed by the Queen. And one of them was appointed by Tony Blair as Minister for Child Safety. And at the time, we had a guy called Sir Peter Heyman, who was head of MI6, a convicted paedophile, and he was linked to PI. So they have the access to information of children that are at risk.
Do you know what gets me is I hate hearing this stuff. For me, children are the most important thing, most precious thing that we've got on this planet. I don't see how anybody can look into the eyes of a child, number one, find it sexual in any way at all. And it's heartbreak. Like I said, since I've been speaking out, I've had a lot of people contact me. There's a guy, I won't say his name, but he reached out to me on Twitter. I've heard his story, and he tells me about all this stuff that they done to him back in the day, satanic rituals and stuff. And this is, people have been saying that there's something satanic going on, John. And I'm like, but as time's going on, I'm starting to think, you know what, there's definitely something in what we're going through just now. Because I said that to you earlier on, we're really on a period of time right now in history that's, I don't even know how to describe it.
People have to pick a side, and they have to wake up to the fact that this spiritual war exists. It's a reality. They might not believe in the devil, but the devil believes in them, and there is a battle for your soul. Whether you want to agree with it or not, it's documented enough, and it's an ancient battle, and it's been going on. And I'll say to people, at your own risk, ignore this.
Yeah.
At your own risk, it's a reality, and it goes on.
Tell me a bit about, we've not even had an introduction. Tell me a bit about the police, mate. Obviously, you got into the police at how old were you when you joined the police?
I joined in my early 20s.
Early 20s. And how long were you in the police?
27 and a half years.
27 and a half years. And What age were you then? Just
24 years old.
24, so I don't want to guess your age, mate, but that was a while ago. And when I wanted to be a copper when I was younger, John, honestly, right? Somebody said to me I would have been a good copper, to be honest with you.
Well, you're tall enough.
Yeah, that was the criteria back then, wasn't it? The height and that, and and it was kind of like back in the day that you'd go to the police if you wanted help, or the police. There's good guys, bad guys, and the police. Nowadays it doesn't feel like that. Nowadays it feels more like when you see the police, you actually get the fright because you're like, what have I done? Now, for example, I think it was not that long ago that I was sitting outside in a car park. I was stuck in bed for 14 months, and sometimes I like to get out of the house. I sit on my own, I'll eat food, sit and flick on my phone. Next minute, coppers have shown up because I'm in a dark spot myself in the middle of the night. And what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm having food. If I want to get out of the house when I was stuck in a bed for 14 months, it's a free country. I can do that. And it feels now when the average person, the police are not protecting the average person. It seems that we want to arrest people. If there's a man over there with a knife and there's a man over there pissing in the corner on the street, we'll go for that one instead of this one.
Do you know what it's termed? It's called low-hanging fruit. That's the term of it. And we've seen such a stringent example of that with what happened in Liverpool, Southport, with the massacre of those young girls, in which the government really went out their way to put misinformation about the suspect. And rightly so, the decent folk of the UK were outraged. And this should have been like mourning on the level of something like Lockerbie or Dunblane, that this is appalling. Why is there not a Panorama documentary or a World in Action documentary or Channel 4 dispatches about this? How did this allow to happen? How was this young man so badly radicalised? That I said from the start there'll be a history with this guy. There will be a history, and it will be a dark history. He hasn't come out of nowhere, right? And people were so enraged at it, and they took to the streets.
But they didn't just take to the streets because they've been taking to the streets because they've had concerns for a long time. These people, they've been talking about these things, these concerns for long, and there've been these many incidents happening with children, the stabbings and stuff around the UK, and it's like we've had enough. But again, the propaganda machine played a massive part in the divide and conquer, mate.
And they've done it, and people are buying the lie. This is a problem. They're buying the lie. They bought the lie regarding the virus that it came out. How has they allowed a Trotskyite Marxist to run this country? Have we not learnt our lessons? What happens with Marxism and the dangers of it, and socialism, which is this. Keir Starmer is a Trotskyite. He's documented as a Trotskyite, and that was his preference of left-wing politics that he aimed for. And it's out there for anyone who wants to research it. And it's a form of Marxism, which is a left extreme form of socialism. And socialism is backed up militarily. So we're going to end up with a military junta, really, in this country, where anyone who speaks out against a narrative is smashed so hard, which is exactly what we saw with the backlash to which really was a catalyst, this horrific mutilation of children in Southport. And we still don't know the full facts because they won't allow it out there. And he has crushed people so hard. But I did quite a few interviews when this come in, because I was seconded to a unit for a couple of years, and it was an anti-protest unit that I just shoved on, and it was in a knee-jerk reaction to the riots that we had in 2010 to 2012 in England. And the government turned around and said, right, anyone protesting, smash them, right? And they actually got smashed, and they got sent to prison for 18 months, which ordinarily they'd have got a caution. And even their solicitors were in on it. we had, usually when you get someone prosecuted, you have to send off a file, which has to then be scrutinised prior to it being sent off by the CPS. And then they always give you extra work to do. So it could take ages. And then it goes away for 6 weeks and the minimum period. And then it might come back with a decision to charge. It's a lengthy ball ache of a process. All of a sudden, they expedited that and streamlined it. And they brought in barristers, CPS barristers, working in our office. We had 2 of them in our office working with us, and 24-hour courts. And we were watching people that should have got cautions getting sent away for 18 months. And their solicitors were part of that machine, right? So they didn't get any justice from the police, and they didn't get any justice from their own legal team. So I saw it. So I knew what to expect. And I warned people, be careful, because this guy has given the thumbs up to the judiciary. Now, when there is a political shift in government, so when the right wing leave and the left wing come in, what a lot of people don't realise is that the judiciary, the high courts, are appointed left wing. So we now have a left wing leaning judiciary. And that's how it works. It's not right wing anymore, it's now left wing. So whatever the left say, they're going to push it because they're appointed now to do that. So it's left wing, not just with the government, but also with policing and with the judiciary, the courts and everything else. And they're going to push for this. And we're going to see it on a Marxist thing. And the mandate of Marxism and Trotskyism is chaos through change. And straight away, we saw chaos on the streets.
When you say Marxism, what do you mean by that? Like,
it's extreme left-wing politics.
right.
And this is what we've got. And Trotskyism is even left of that.
Can you give me an example of extreme leftism? Like,
saw it in some Central American countries, like Angola. When you go out to Trotskyism, when you go out to Russia, St. Petersburg and places like that, the post-war Soviet Union, East Germany, when they had Stalinism, total control of the people. You're not allowed religion under this. The state is it, so it's an atheistic. I think under socialism you are allowed a religion, but you must worship the state. Communism, there's no religion. The state is a religion, so you haven't got any spiritual freedom anymore. And whatever the state says, it goes, and it is backed up militarily. And we saw the military get deployed the other week on the streets. It's a worrying precedent, and we're sitting back and watching it, and it's dangerous. And we've already seen it with what he's done with the prisons. Yeah, kicked out thousands and thousands of prisoners, and he's banging up anyone who goes against the state.
Well, he's banged up. So he released these prisoners, and then some of them reoffended within hours, within days. They ended up back in prison. Not only that, he's banged up, and I know people who know people that were that put out things on social media. I've said it before, I don't agree with what they've said in social media, but at the same time, is it worth these people getting 2.5 years in jail for putting out something in the... Because again, we go back to what they said about this kid in Southport. They made out, they showed pictures of him as a little choir boy. And
yeah, Christian, and he's Welsh.
Yeah, and then it comes to light just last week. It was all nonsense and lies. And again, then you've got people who are probably parents, are acting out of rage. Because I look at those pictures of those kids and I go, fucking hell. Like, and you're right in what you said earlier on. The whole of the UK should have been grieving these children. The whole of the UK, we should have been, the family, we should have all been round lighting a candle, like what happened with these, but what happened, it was hijacked by the government, lazy labelling people far right, but instead of Keir Starmer coming out and going, you know what, I need to listen to the people, I need to get an understanding of what's going on, how can I fix this for you? But no, I'm going to label you all far right, and we're going to start to just fucking lock you up.
Why not standing by and supporting the family of the Southport massacre, which is what it was, a massacre of children? Yet there was MP standing there and sort of I stand by Chris Cabba. the guy who was shot down, the guy that was on bail for murder, the gunman that was shot by the copper, and the copper stood trial for him, the lad in London. So there was a big thing where they were standing by him, and he was a little yardy gunman. And they made a copper stand trial for shooting him, and he was ramming the police. There's a lot more to it. I'm oversimplifying it a bit, but that got all the publicity and that we should stand by him, and politicians were there. Yeah. Not one of them is going out. Why was the king, why was our sovereign leader, our monarch, not on the streets of Southport that day, that minute? Why were they not saying, right, anyone caught with a knife now, you're getting 5 years?
Yeah.
Do you know, I do a lot with ex-offenders, and there's a group of them that have got a charity, and it's Save a Life, Put Down a Knife. And they go and they give talks all round in high knife crime areas. And we was in one area, they invited me along once to a talk that was given. And an ex-convicted murderer, an ex-gangster gave a fantastic talk. And the demographic of the people there were families who have lost a child to knife crime. And because of the area, a majority of them were black families. And a few of them know who I was, and I was warmly received. And I said to them, what would you want the police to do about this? Inner city, predominantly black areas, right? And they've lost a kid to knife crime. And every one of them, every single parent that was there said, if the police had stopped and searched these boys, my son would be alive to this day. So I'm saying, you actually endorse stop and search. And they all went, yes, we do. So when you've got the middle class white political narrative saying it's oppressive and all that, whereas the community that got affected by it most have said, no, we want the police hands in pockets on our street. And that's what they want. And a lot of these ex-gangsters, they were trying to say we should have the Bobby back on the...
Well, we've got it seems that we have got a knife crime epidemic, or is that the right word, epidemic?
Well, look at Scotland, look at Glasgow.
Well, we managed to wipe it out. Scotland, we were the knife capital of Europe at one point. Yeah, and then what happens is, these laws come into play, and, you can get up to, I think it's 5 years if you're found in possession of these things. We managed to sort it out. So why can't they?
That's right. Because what they'll say is they're targeting an ethnic demographic. Whereas when you talk to that community, they say, we want the coppers putting their hands in their pockets. Don't worry about the colour of the kid or whatever. Do it.
I mean,
because it will save lives.
I don't want to sound in it, but I come into London a lot, and it seems to be a lot more people of a colour than white people nowadays. And you say that, but I'm sorry, but my eyes don't deceive me. I'm going around London and I'm seeing more.
It is the most diverse city on the planet.
100%.
And this area we're in now, there's probably not many white English people left. They're not. It is the biggest mix you get. There's I got into an altercation just outside down the road here the other day. Well, go back a couple of months. And I had to throw 3 lads out of a place. They were causing trouble, and I threw them out. And the police had to get called, and there were threats and all that were made. And one of the coppers knew me, and he went, John, you've got to be careful. He said, it's not like when you were policing, where you could just smash them and kick them and slap them and that. He said, now they'll stab you and they'll kill you. And he said, especially that estate where you was, he said, be careful they don't come back and stab you. And I said, oh, surely not. He went, John, they're stabbing each other for nothing. It was Theresa May. She brought in a thing where she didn't want the police stopping and searching. And my friend was a sergeant, probably the most violent area in the country, okay, in southeast London, Peckham, right? And he turned around to me and said, she has now condemned loads of black kids to die at the end of a knife now. Within days, the murder rate rocketed. And I think the following year, it superseded any expectation that there'd ever been of murders, stabbings on the street. And it was all down to her and this liberal way of thinking. These people have got to understand what street life is.
Politicians are so out of touch with the common people. This is what I've said. Someone says to me you should get into politics, John, and I'm like, I couldn't think of anything worse, to be honest with you. But these people are so out of touch with the common person. They've never been on the street. They've never been skint. They've never struggled in life. Why is it? Why do we have to have the suited and booted? Why do they always have to have these degrees? Why are we not having these people, the common person running the country? Because I can tell you what, John, there's a lot of big problems in this country with a lot of simple solutions.
Of course there is. Of course there is. And common sense doesn't come into it. Now, take your plight. There was an MP who stood up and said that these jags are the worst things ever, and what's gone on is probably the biggest malfeasance we've ever seen. They kicked him out, and that was Andrew Bridgen.
Yeah. They've done it in all. There was one in Scotland I had as well who was working alongside Andrew, and his name was Neil Hanvey. I had Neil on the podcast. Neil slowly but surely realised that, and he came from a clinical background. He worked in clinical trials in the past, so he understood how they all worked. And sat down, had a conversation, introduced him to people, and he sat down and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He was like, I can't believe this is the biggest scandal in history.
It is, but the child abuse stuff's been ongoing for years.
100%.
And when they...
Probably the biggest medical scandal, yeah.
Yeah, and when they had the inquiry, the national inquiry kicked up, they started demanding paperwork that had been hidden, right? They give them D notices, right? And we got to understand a D notice is a defence notice. It is a tool used by the military intelligence, not the civilian police. So why are D notices being issued on child abuse cases? We got to look at what's going on with our politicians. Now, when I mentioned earlier on about people like Nicholas Fairbairn, and we've got politicians in this country, and there are many allegations made out against a Home Secretary called Leon Britton. The inquiry came out in that he had abused children. And then there was allegations made against our former Prime Minister, Ted Heath, that he'd not only abused, but he'd seriously sexually abused, a lot of children. And there was an investigation called Operation Conifer looking into him and what he was involved in. Actually, some of the intelligence inferred that he was actually involved in satanic ritual abuse, a Prime Minister. And then we look at, from Cameron downwards, the next five previous Prime Ministers had PAs, which are political advisors, that had either been accused of or involved in the abuse of children or sexual offending against children, right? These are political advisors to Prime Ministers. We've got cabinet ministers, front benchers and back benchers that have all come from the same elitist background, that have gone to these young schools, that have then gone into, that are feeder schools or schools like Eton, and then gone into Cambridge, that have been involved in the fagging system, that have been involved in caning and being caned and giving out canings, and then sodomizing, in seriously sexual assaulting the younger fags, as they're called, as they're termed. And what does it do to their mind and to the whole thinking? They're broken, they're emotionally destroyed. So when they started requesting these files, which have been hidden away for whatever known reason, we can only think it's a sinister one, there was something like, I can't remember how many it was, maybe it was 30 files. Theresa May hid them. And then there were fires and floods in all these storage depots that housed social services records, which may well have put the finger on so many people in these positions of power and privilege that were involved in these cover-ups.
Why is child abuse such a covered up thing, John? Why is this not at the front of...
Because so many people are involved in it, and because it's the ultimate control. It's got the biggest blackmail value ever. Years ago, you could control someone and threaten them with being a homosexual. 1965, the law changed, but prior to that, going back to the 1500s, it was punishable by imprisonment, and sometimes life imprisonment, and sometimes death, by being homosexual. So it goes back to medieval times that it's against the law. okay? And there's an argument that it's always been against the word of God anyway. But seeing as our laws are backed by Christian doctrine, because we're in a Christian country, that would probably seem about right. And then they changed the laws. So after 1965, you couldn't really blackmail someone. Although there were cases, and there was a cases of an MP called Jeremy Thorpe, and a few others that got caught up in these homosexual scandals. And then the military, up until the late 90s, it was still illegal. The military and the merchant navy, it was still deemed very inappropriate and wrong to have homosexuals operating there, although they knew they did. But if you were caught, you faced court-martial, imprisonment and fined and everything else, but instant expulsion. But now that's not the case. In fact, they've gone the other way. They openly promote it. And then, again, having an affair could be deemed as having blackmail value. Cocaine, if someone was involved in drugs, you could blackmail. And now they're seen as being a bit of a boy, a bit of a geezer, a bit of a girl, whatever, if they've had a life of drug taking and cocaine use. And I think Boris Johnson's alluded to it. David Cameron's Mrs. Sam Cam, apparently her nickname was Snowy because of how much she shoved up her nose. You've got people like...
Where do you hear all this kind of stuff, John?
Yeah, well, it comes out in popular culture, and it comes out in the media, and you've got people like Jeremy Osborne, where the newspaper alleged that he would be involved in coke sniffing parties and things like that. And nothing's done about it because it's not a problem anymore. However, there is not one culture on this planet that allows sex with a child. Not one. Even in indigenous cultures, which are outside of the jurisdiction of law, such as tribes, they still ban it. They don't allow it. Even in Papua New Guinea, in the Pygmy tribes, it's outlawed. And there is a punishment akin to a death penalty if someone's caught doing it, because they know it destroys society. But when someone is abused, they're broken. Like I said to you earlier, they're emotionally broken, and their wants and needs sexually are distorted. And if you have these people running a country, it ain't the right thing, because they're not of right mind and emotions to do it. They're damaged and they're broken. I genuinely believe that they should psychometrically test people. I went through vetting to a top secret level. I had a job with the police as a field intelligence officer, dealing with top secret information. And I had to be vetted. And that vetting was so stringent, I had to tell them of every single sexual partner I was aware of. Right? And I was told that if I was involved in swinging, wife swapping, and all that, I wouldn't get the job. If I was on social media, I wouldn't get the job. And if I was homosexual, there's a good chance I wouldn't get a job. So it was openly prejudiced against homosexuals, because the inference was that you were more likely to be prone to blackmail and tempted due to a promiscuous lifestyle than someone who was heterosexual. And it was a fact. And there was nothing the employment and equality people could do about it, because it was a fact, and that's how it worked. Whereas an MP doesn't get put through that vetting process. An MP can go to prison for a term 1 day less than a year and still keep their job. If I had a brother and they got caught shoplifting, I'd lose my job as a copper. Whereas these people can do what they want. Now, it's wrong. They should be psychometrically tested to see if they have a sexual liking of children. When I went onto the child protection units, I had to have psychometric testing, and I was asked, and I was tested for psychometrically for paedophilia, to see if I watched child porn or I had a liking to child porn. And they had a way of detecting it through questioning. And it's a clever way of doing it. And also, if someone had been sexually abused, they could determine through these tests if that had happened, and there was a chance that you might not get the job, because it could affect your judgment. They call it the hero complex. So if someone has been abused, they'll want to get in these units. They'll want to go paedophile hunting. They'll want to, because they want to get these bastards and hurt them, and I get that. But sometimes the emotional balance can cause an error of judgment, and it can cause an exaggeration of the facts and things like that. And this is what comes out of the psychometric testing.
See, when you were in the police, that's just fucking mental. I can't, like, there's so many of these stories that come out and all that, and it's like, you know, they talk about great resets. We really need a great reset regarding politicians. It needs to be stripped back, because it's just, it's only two parties, you know. In Scotland we'll maybe get three parties, you know. There's only a couple of parties that, you know, we'll go this way, we'll go that way. They're all fucking liars. They've all been, I mean, Keir Starmer's proven every month that he's a fucking liar. You know, we won't do this, we won't do that. Every month. These people, do you know what annoys me is, like, see the way I spoke to Sunak on the telly? I'm sorry, but that's how people, see when I see people sitting there and they're all fucking walking about with them and they're all getting a picture taken, I'm like, where's the fucking backbone, man? These people have handed out something to people. They cover up so much stuff, but at the end you're all sitting there ready for fucking photos.
When I spoke out and the police tried to imprison me, they tried to do horrific things to me. And again, that there's enough out there on me to have a grounding on what I'm about. But there was a politician who was a cabinet minister, so he was a privy councillor, he was a front bencher, he was one of Theresa May's frontline warriors, really. But he was also the minister that had governance for the police, and later on the armed forces, and also the fire brigade. And he spoke out. He said, "I'm going to help you out here. This is wrong. You've been treated wrong." So he summons the commissioner of the Met Police, Cressida Dick, to Parliament to answer questions. She never turned up because she didn't want to. And then he spoke out because he had information that there could be an attempt by the intelligence services on my life if I continued to speak out the way I was.
What were you speaking of, just in the child abuse stuff?
Yeah, the cover-ups, the deliberate cover-ups of child abuse and how it had always gone on. Mm-hmm. But I was getting such public backing that they feared that I was getting politically influential. And the intelligence services did contact me and told me to pack it in. And he got the nod because he was representing me politically and told, "You better tell young Wedger to shut his gob because he might not make the end of the day." So he spoke out, and I was there in front of the committee for the Home Office and Theresa May, and said, I really fear for Jon Wedger's safety, and this needs to be looked at under the Home Affairs Select Committee. The next day, Theresa May sacked him for his cabinet position for dealing with policing. He was sacked. He was removed the next day, and she told him to stay away from Jon Wedger. But the Home Affairs Select Committee, which are the adjudicator, like the political ombudsman, as it were, the guy that was in charge of it was a man called Keith Vaz. And at the same time, he was involved in a massive scandal involving rent boys and cocaine use. And it was all over the papers. And I know Andrew Bridgen had a big input in helping to expose this wrong. And he was running the group that was adjudicating on the wrongdoers. And he was one of them. You're up against something so monumental, and it comes down to money. And when you've got this satanic ritual abuse, you're really getting into the biggest form of organised criminality you'll ever imagine.
Yeah,
this is what is running the world, and this is what gets me labelled as a conspiracy theorist and all that. But I'm going to tell you now what we're seeing in America with P. Diddy, what we're seeing with Jeffrey Epstein, was satanic. And you'll find out that there will be rituals. You've even got people like Beyonce alluding to it all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, we're going to get into Diddy pretty soon, to be honest with you, because there's something going on. Like I say, there's only so many times they can keep covering up the fucking eye and all that and do all this stuff. I want to go back to, you know, we've got, like, going back to the riots and all that happened, you know, what this government are doing right now. You know, we've got Hugh Edwards, who's been downloading all this horrific stuff, but gets a slap in the wrist and walks away. You know, there's how many times do they cover all this stuff up? When you were in the police, At what point did you realise that there's something going on here, and realised the level of corruption?
It took me a few years because there's a world of difference between like the uniform street policing and the detective side of it. And then the police is so heavily compartmentalised that the left hand never knows what the right hand's doing in the whole world of policing. And it's only when you start dealing with sexual abuse crimes and that of children that you get into darkness. And this is where it starts getting sinister, and that's where cover-ups appear, and this is where you're told, back away, back away. And this is where you have an overlap with the intelligence services, because it's a weakness, and it affects so many people. Whereas a politician who's a PDF file won't go into a Witherspoons and get drunk and start smashing people up. You know, he won't get on a stolen moped and drive around the housing estate. He won't get involved in that nonsense, benign, bottom level crime. But if they come from these backgrounds of the people I've mentioned, there's a weakness there, a sexual weakness. And this is where it can cause instability, because they start getting caught up in this dark world, and especially the ritualistic thing, and it becomes a secret society. It's their special club with their special secrets. And if you go against them, you're in a world of trouble, and it's like an unseen enemy. I get attacked a lot by some media channels. There's one journalist who self-proclaims to be the oracle of journalism. She's a doctor of journalism, and she openly attacks me all the time in her talks and everything else. Her name's Rosie Waterhouse, and she seems, in my opinion, to have a very pro-satanic agenda. But when it comes to me speaking out about the reality of Satanism, and it is a real thing, she tries to debunk it in every way she can. And her and quite a few others. So you get quite a concerted an organised attack. You also get your social media platforms shut down and things like that. So sort of standard abuse. You do ruffle feathers a little bit, and there's a lot of damaged people out there, you know, that because they've been affected by abuse, and some think that I know more than I do, and they think that I know that they're a PDF file when I probably don't. You know, it's a bit like being in the presence of a psychic, you know, and you're with your missus and you think, oh, I wonder if that psychic knows I've been having an affair, you know. And it's a bit like sex offenders do that with me. They're thinking, that's that Jon Wedger. I wonder if he can sniff that I'm a wrong 'un, you know. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, I probably can't. Survivor might, but I probably can't. But there'll be a level of paranoia, and they won't want to be in my presence. They don't want to be near me. There's one police officer, he's on the telly quite a bit. I can't name him for legal reasons, but he's a wrong 'un. I know he's a wrong 'un because survivors have told me. And I was at a conference once for survivors of abuse, and I turned up with an anti-child abuse campaigner. He saw me, this guy, and he climbed over 3 rows of seats to get away and get out the door.
Was he a well-known police officer on the telly?
Yeah. And he couldn't get quick enough out there, and he's always making out he's helping survivors. And I know he's a wrong 'un. I know he's a wrong 'un. I know he is, because he's been mentioned to me by many, many people. And ritual abuse as well. But the stakes are high with the ritual abuse, because it gives people a leg up in business, in sport, in entertainment. You know, the demons will keep to their side of the bargain. But your side is, as a Satanist, is the blood ritual. There's no blood in hell, and the demons want blood. Now, that either comes like a voodoo ritual by cutting a chicken's head off, or like these low-level witchcraft people where they mutilate cats, or like the organised, serious Satanists where it's the blood of a child. And I've spoke to people who have killed children, who've stabbed them, babies, and stabbed them. I've spoken to quite a few who've done that. They've stabbed children and killed them on rituals. And I've also seen official statements, police statements, where street prostitutes have actually sold their children. They've got pregnant on purpose and sold their children to a go-between, and they know that infant baby, newborn, is going for a ritual. And this was going back to the 90s, and one woman was being paid £2,000 each time she provided. She's a heroin addict. So they've got access to these children. And they'll get that from within, from incest. There'll be what they call breeders, members of their own coven that will get pregnant and will provide aborted fetuses or babies for these rituals. And there's big money in it, big money. I heard of one guy who went on to become a world champion boxer who went to Christianity because he'd been involved in a ritual and had gone and had a ritual done so he would get a title. And the backlash was so appalling that he's now running to Jesus and has now become a committed Christian. Footballer.
Why is he not speaking out regarding these things?
Well, he can't. I mean, they'll get killed, or they'll go to prison. I was told that the baby in the Thames, a body in the Thames, the young Adam, the young black torso that was found in the Thames back in about 2000, that ritual was done for a footballer to gain Premiership status. But again, it'll be for a building. There's the police in Uganda are clamping down. They've got like an anti-witchcraft unit there, and there was a documentary, and they intercepted a building, a shopping centre, where a baby, a young boy, was procured for a human sacrifice for the prosperity of the shopping centre. And if we look on history, the last three, I think there's been 5 London bridges. The last 3 have had human sacrifices in their foundations. So it goes on, and that's a historical fact.
This is all documented.
Yeah, that's a historical fact. Yeah, that the last 3 London bridges have had human sacrifices in their foundations, and so it's always gone on, but there's power in it, and the devil rewards instantly. God does it in His own time, but you'll never pay the debt. You know, you're talking about demonic influence that will torment them people for eternity. And what we're looking at, Diddy and the entertainment industry, they all think they're gods themselves, and they're openly showing satanic symbolism. That they're showing it.
Yeah, that's one thing like that baffles me is how they've kind of, they've always talking about the Illuminati and all that kind of stuff, right? And what you've noticed is that they've made it more jokey. So it's been in like South Park, and they always called it things, and they've always been like, oh, the Illuminati, and it's time. What I think we're going through right now, like I say, there's so many people that say we're going through something spiritual just now, and like I said, John, I've spoken about it in my podcast before, and what happened to me, I made a prayer, and I said I would try and make as much noise about this as possible, and I've spoken about it, and it was a very powerful prayer. I'll never forget it. And then things started to get better for me. I found a doctor within 2 days from people seeing me. And for me, I believe in God in my own way. I don't want to go to a church and have someone
It's a
tell
personal
me,
relationship with God.
Yeah, I want to find it in my own personal way. Because I've been to like people that try to take me to churches, and to be honest with you, I feel like they're trying to turn into a cult with me, and I'm like, nah.
I'm totally with you on that. I'm totally with you.
So for me, when you start to see all and it's especially happened in the last 2 weeks, where you've got people like I say, they keep doing this thing with the eye, they do all these things with, like they're covering themselves in blood, they're doing these.
Look at Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
She's wretched. Look, the 27 Club. It's full of people who wanted out of Satanism.
Yeah, I've heard about these. There was a documentary called They All Died at 27, wasn't it?
And that's to do with a ritual, satanic ritual called the I Will ritual. And it's at 13-year increments. So they do the first one at 13, the second one at 26, And if they don't attend the 26 or they want out, the next year they die. And that's because they're going against Satanism. So that's what is at the base of...
And again, when you go to what we try to see with Kamala Harris getting in power, we've seen all these celebrities come out, you had, fucking hell. I've never seen fucking J-Lo beg so much for fucking something, she went out with this guy, we've seen pictures, you've been to the fucking parties, definitely. And then the one that really fucked me off was a man who I've spoken about before, a man that I idolised, a man that I think is fucking amazing, the best rapper ever known to man, the greatest of all time in my honest opinion. His name was Eminem. And then he comes out for Kamala Harris. And I'm sitting going like, everybody, if Eminem's first song that he just brought out for his new album, right, is totally against everything Kamala Harris stands for. He's going against the LGBT stuff. He talks about all the woke stuff. And I'm like, you've just fucking sided with it. And see if you're all these Kamala Harris supporters, you'd all be like, get him out, because everything Eminem stands for. And I'm like to myself, I honestly don't think that's the same guy now.
No, well, they need to be brave and just speak the truth. And they need to stick with the truth, because it will set them free. In order for the triumph of evil, it takes but for good men and women, and them they us, to do nothing. And silence is acquiescence, in my opinion, to this. You've got to speak out. Now is the time to speak out. Justin Bieber needs to speak out. And I want to give a call out to the survivors, especially in respect to what we're seeing. We saw it with the Dolphin Square and the Elm Guesthouse and the IICSA and the Scottish Inquiry. We've seen it all. Politicians and celebrities named. We've seen it over here, and it did get, in my opinion, covered up. They need to speak out. The security guards, a lot of them that are ex-military, ex-LB, they need to speak out. They need to speak out. So all of the tough guys that were appointed to stand over P. Diddy and all the others, because they see it. We see it now with what's his name, who owns Harrods, Al-Fayed, Mohammed Al-Fayed, all the girls that he's being accused of R-ing and sexually assaulting, seriously. His security, which would have been ex-military, ex-police, speak out, be proper men, because you would have seen them young girls getting taken into his office, and you would have seen them coming out there crying and deliberately really upset. And I want to call out to those that are involved, those that have abused kids in these rituals and in these Diddy parties. I want to call out to them and say, you're not going to live forever, and at some point you're going to face judgment, whether you believe in it or not. But if you are worshipping the devil, you're worshipping a liar. He will abandon you and he will deceive you. Go to God and repent for what you've done. Go to the police and tell the police of what you've done. And any money you've made, give it to the survivors, charities and everything else to help them rebuild their lives, and do the right things while you're still alive, while you can, because soon it'll be too late. And there must be many, many of these actors, actresses, politicians that die in torment. That's why they don't want to get old. That's why they're forever young, looking forever young. They're frightened of getting old. They're frightened of the ultimate judgment, because they know what they've done for their fame. And do you know what? None of it was worth it. Even if you've got £1 through them means, it won't be worth it.
You hear them say that, you sell your soul to the devil. Never understood that phrase, to be honest with you, but see now.
Well, it's a bit unambiguous, isn't it? I mean, it's Bob Dylan, he said the secret of my success was the governor, the devil, the chief. Mm-hmm. He said, that's what I did. I sold it. Loads of them have said that. They've been open with it, and it don't leave you hanging. They're telling you what they've done. Yeah. And when they do all this, they're telling you what they are. Yeah. The Eye of Horus, the demonic, the Baal worship, the Moloch.
But people won't see it. They won't see this because it's entertainment. They'll still go and buy the tickets. And to be honest with you, it's hard for me to stick on an Eminem track now, because now I'm thinking to myself, what have you done, mate? What have they got on you?
I won't. Netflix, right? I like to be entertained sometimes. and I go home and put this film on, and there's certain I'm like, no, I'm not watching that. There's no way I'm watching that. I'm not watching that.
You know, there was one that, see, to be honest with you, I didn't fucking like it. Game of Thrones, right? Now, I watched it during the lockdown. To be honest with you, I didn't think it was that great.
Like perverted as well. There's always
But
a bird getting
they
their
brought
knuckles
out the next season or whatever it was, right? And there was a scene in it, right? There was a scene in it, and I was like, I'm not fucking watching this. It was like the second episode into it, right? And it was very, very graphic. It was too graphic for me, and it was like this older guy, and he's with a young girl. You don't get to see much, but you see him lying on top of her. And I'm sitting going, and now I'm looking, and I'm going like, they're trying to desensitize everyone to make this look normal. And I was like, get this off my telly. I will not watch Game of Thrones because it's fucking perverted, and it really is. We can listen to it, you know, they can tell it, but we don't need to see that kind of graphic detail.
Look at these things, right? Years ago, you found a porno mag under a bush, and everyone shared it at school. Now you can go on these things, and it's just pure porn. And any porn you want is on there. And up until recently, in Spain, bestiality is not illegal. In Spain, it's not illegal.
Really?
Yeah, so you can watch animals involved. And in Spain, it's just, the whole thing is twisted and it's destructive. And we need to wake up, and we need to get the innocence back. You know, we've just had Halloween, and as a Christian, I don't believe in it. I think it's wrong anyway. But that aside, years ago on an estate, there'd be loads of kids going out there doing it, and bonfire night, there'll be loads of kids setting up fireworks, everything. There's no one now doing it because there's no kids about now. And if there are, they're staying indoors and they're idolising this nonsense.
The other thing as well, and I want to get back to Diddy, one of the things as well is the internet has really made people like me scared, like adults. And what I mean by that is a lot of us are now scared to let our children out of sight, and we're kind of wrapping them up in cotton wool now. You know, back in the day, the 90s and that, you know, we'd be out, come home when the street lights are on, you know, the street lamps. You just get kicked out, you do what you want, you know, you'd be away, and it'd be like, you come back for your dinner, do you know what I mean? But now it's like, for me, you know, if you've got kids and that, it's kind of like you're too scared to let them out your sight because you know that this kind of stuff that you're talking about happens.
Young girls, like I said earlier on, 8.3 million views. And there would have been young kids watching this. This influencer called Bonnie Blue having sex with 1,000 students in 24 hours. 8.3 million people watched her giving this talk about what she's going to do. Yeah. And she's an influencer. Why is that allowed?
Yeah.
You know, morally, she should be in prison, what she's doing. And so many of the girls now are totally desensitized sexually. Yeah. And the boys have got this twisted opinion of what women want and what they don't want. They're spending the whole time masturbating. Nothing gets done because people are, you know, even like things like TikTok. I got to a point, I was sitting there for hours just watching stupid videos. And I'm thinking, like, years ago, I used to go and fix this, go and cut the hedge, walk the dog, do that. And all I've done is that. Yeah. It's an addiction.
TikTok, to me, I think TikTok's a problem. What I mean by that is it's dumbing people down, but it's also making us not have a attention span isn't as long. So it's kind of like ADHD, I suppose. And, you know, that app to me and many others, you know, is a problem, but you're not going to get rid of it because that's the way society is now. But we hear a lot of people that are wrong. In my opinion, you know, there's people like yourself that are doing really good work.
You get attacked, and, you know, when this goes out, because we've been spoken about Satanism, you watched... You know, Tossers United, who get together whenever I talk about ritual abuse.
No,
you watch them come. Honestly, it's incredible.
Well, there was another one that was, I can't remember the name of it, right, but it was quite big during lockdown. And it was like this Netflix series. And it was like these people, they moved into an area, they had a house, and things were happening, and all the neighbours were out and about, and these things were happening, these strange events. I can't remember what the name of it was called, so if anyone knows, then comment underneath. And it was really big, John. But one of the scenes in it was he meets this guy in a cafe, right, and the guy tells him about this ritual they done, and it was a baby, and they were all circled around with the hoods, and I'm sitting going, how many times do you need to tell me these things happen?
Well, look at the series Lucifer Morning Star, and they're showing him as he's out crime fighting, that he's a benevolent do-gooder. There's a series called Lucifer on Netflix. And I said to my son, why are you watching that? Oh, yeah, no, he helps solve crime. I said, oh, come on. You know, it's a devil. They don't realise what they're messing with. It's real, and it will rob you, and it will infest your soul. Yeah. And once you let the demonic in, you try getting rid of them on your own, because it ain't going to happen.
And it's like I say, selling your soul to the devil, you know, because you get people on TikTok, and I feel everybody's selling their soul because they'll do anything for fame now. Everybody wants a bit of fame. Everybody wants to be a fucking idiot. And I'm sitting going, the level of intelligence of people is going down. You know, they want fame, they want this, and I'm like, I said that when I was on this.
Well, that's the devil is saying that you are God. You are the living God. And you look at these guys on TikTok that are all buffed up and tattooed up, walking around like they're a god and talking about only women they're shagging and doing this. Total self-indulgence. There's not one bit of moral substance in anything they're doing. And the girls are saying, like, this one shagging this and shagging that. You've got these podcasters with these millennial boys sitting there with their woolly hats on and their spacer earrings, interviewing porn stars, going on about how many times they've done anal. Yeah. And they're all laughing about it. I'm thinking, how is that allowed when what you're talking about potentially is life-saving, because they're going to try this stunt again. Yeah. The first one was a precursor, and then they hit you down, they strike you down. Same with me. I've had, I don't know, I think near enough every video I put out. Someone said to me, right, John, you're not allowed to talk about Satanism, rape, paedophilia, and child abuse in general.
What, on a podcast?
Well, there's no point me talking then, is there? I mention my name and that's it. What?
You've just totally suppressed the truth right there.
That's it. Whereas girls like Bonnie Blue can go on about sucking off and shagging this, thousands of men, and that's allowed.
It's like I say, I don't have anything against porn stars or anything like that, mate. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, but at the same time, I just feel that the society nowadays, everybody's selling their soul for a bit of fame.
Again, she may be misguided. But at the same time, she's misguiding these.
But if you're an influencer, you know.
Yeah, it's wrong. Yeah, if you care about these girls, empower them to be girls, not to be porn.
Surely, if a father's in her life, you're going to step in and go, fucking back in the house, you know. Going back to P Diddy, mate. Why? Obviously, these rituals and all that happen, right? What I'm trying to get my head around, right? These things happen, they know what happens and all that, but why did they take them at a certain time? Does that make sense? So, for example, Epstein knew he was doing it for so long. Then we had Harvey Weinstein as well, the Me Too movement, like him, and now we've got P Diddy at this moment in time. Was it a government tactic for Kamala Harris? We've got dirt on you. Let's bring all these influencers, all these celebrities in to vote for me.
Once the devil don't need you, he'll abandon you. And what they've got to understand is the God they worship, don't care for them, he's a liar. Right? So once they've outlived what they've had to do, they're gone. And they will be, but what we're being thrown are crumbs from the table. This might be a major distraction from what really is going on. When the Epstein thing come out, it indicated members of a main member of our royal family. Straight away, when that happened, this virus turned up and the distraction appeared and no one revisited it, right? They've not gone back to pre-virus days with the Epstein list and what was going on with Prince Andrew. We don't even hear from him anymore, right? It's Remembrance Sunday today. He would have been there. Why has he not been sacked from the royal family? Why is he still part of it? It's wrong. But there's a distraction going on. And we're just getting crumbs from the table with this Diddy thing.
Yeah.
There'll be a bigger thing going on. It is all planned. The timing for them will be perfect. And they've outlived them. Maybe they've gone against their rules and regulations, and they're told, a bit like with Freemasonry, if you discuss what goes on, you'll have your throat sick, you'll have your stomach cut open, you will this, that, and the other. What was said to me when I exposed the deliberate cover-up of young children involved in prostitution, if you mention a word of this, you're thrown to the wolves. Why would I be thrown to the wolves for telling the truth about the most abhorrent crime going? Because it's damaging. And it's hugely damaging. And
it's only damaging to the victims. It's not damaging for what?
Well, it's damaging to those involved. Those that
Well, those people should be fucking behind bars, mate.
Of course. And ultimately, when they take their last breath, they're going to pay for the injustice they've caused. But we're living in a world where the king, the prince of the world, is the devil. It says in the Bible, the prince of the earth is a devil. He runs a world, right? God created it, but the devil runs it. And this is what we're seeing. And if you dance to the beat of the devil, you're going to have riches, but they're temporary and they're going to cause a lot of pain. And this is what we're seeing. People are impatient. They don't want to wait. People who get hurt and they get abused, they think God's abandoned them. They do. P. Diddy is a broken man. He is disturbed. He's emotionally damaged. He lost his virginity at 12. I wasn't even thinking about things like that at the age of 12. I was mucking around with my mates and climbing trees and just doing stupid things at 12. He was having sex with women and he wanted to be like porn stars in films he'd watched. That was his aspiration at 12. He's got this weird obsession with an over-controlling mother. Again, that would indicate that this guy is potentially a perpetrator of domestic violence. Well, come on, wait a minute. Didn't that guard, that mask slip when he ended up beating the daylights out of his girlfriend, who was 3 decades his junior? 3 decades his junior. What is a man of my age doing with a 20-year-old woman? It might not be illegal, but it's wrong. It stinks and it's dirty. It's all wrong. He's a broken, damaged man. And I tell people, do not idolize these. Do not do it. You're idolizing what you think is good. It's not. You don't know these people. It's like you're saying about Eminem. You don't know Eminem. You don't know what he's done, what his private life is. But it's slowly coming out that they're not clean people. And if they are, then do the right thing. Like a supergrass. If you've been involved, then do the right thing and put it right and speak out and help the victims. Give them the last chance of healing, which is through justice. Do not remain silent and do not then say that they're liars and they're making it up, which is what we hear all the time. Like Weinstein and all that, oh, they're liars, they're only doing it for money. You tell me one victim that makes this up for money. Really? I've interviewed for decades survivors of terrible, terrible abuse. On one occasion, did we have a child who made it up? On one occasion. So based on them odds, they're not lying. And really, what money is going to put right that 3 generations of damage? Is that going to fix the leaking anus? Is that going to fix a misaligned womb that comes from abuse? Is that going to fix the syphilis that they might have got when they were a child? And not to mention the emotional and the psychological stress and distress, the addiction, the inability to hold down a relationship and to be loved and to give love because they've been abused by dogs like that. You think money's going to give that? And if you, for 1 minute, think that they're going to openly tell us what they are, think again. These aren't real men. These aren't men out there digging the land so we can have our veg. The real men that are farming cattle in the rain and the snow, they're ponces. They're on stage poncing. You know, they're doing a woman's job, if I'm allowed to say that now. They're not real men. I wouldn't... Listen, we hear about Eminem, we hear about P. Diddy, we hear about 50 Cent, we hear about this, that, and the other. I don't idolize them. There's a man called Gennady Mokanenko, a Ukrainian. No one's heard of him. No one's heard of Gennady Mokanenko. Let me tell you about Gennady Mokanenko. Yeah, Gennady Mokanenko, former soldier from the Ukraine, become a fireman, a champion boxer, a freshwater swimmer, becomes a priest. After the disrupt in the Ukraine and the breakaway, right, and then the civil war out there, he went on because the children were abandoned by the Ukraine. The Ukrainians their system isn't a clean system that it's making out. You know, there's a lot of corruption and terrible things go on in the Ukraine. And they abandoned their children in the care homes. And a lot of these kids went on to live on the streets and were used and abused, right? Heroin addiction, prostitution, and HIV is rampant amongst the street kids of Ukraine. He has saved thousands. He goes out there and he saves them. He brings them home. He detoxes them, right? He gives them stability. He gives them love. He gets them into a training regime. He makes them fit and turns them out as good citizens, right? And gives them what they should have had. He's a father to the fatherless, right? And then what he does, he finds out who hurt them, and he goes and finds these drug dealers, these gangsters, and he personally smashes their faces in. As a priest, he punches their heads in. They did a documentary about him. This guy's a modern day Robin Hood.
What's the documentary?
It's called Almost Holy.
Almost Holy.
Almost Holy. Watch it. So why don't we know about him? And why do we venerate and give all our effort into these ponces that do dominate the American entertainment scene? Well, they don't get a vote from me, none of them, because I don't care for them. And if this exposes them, I'm not going to shed any tears, but there'll be a lot of people that'll be crying. They'll be like when the lefties were screaming because Trump got in. They'll be like that. But I'm telling you now, you're going to get disillusioned. If you put all your faith in actors and in singers, you're going to be disillusioned, because it's going to come out, and it will come out over here. There'll be a backlash over here, and there will be people speaking out. And I'm telling anyone who watches this, anyone who is a survivor of abuse, speak out, speak out, speak out.
You should do like a hashtag, mate, like, and tell them what to do, like a Me Too hashtag or something. You should. I mean, you've got a big enough following.
Oh, there's millions who know who I am and what I say. It never changes.
There you go. For anybody who is, you should all be doing hashtags and all doing a hashtag Me Too. Get this out. It's time for this satanic fucking bullshit of children getting abused. If you've been affected, do not be scared to stand up and speak, because this is how it gets fixed. People need to stand up. Somebody said to me, a guy I spoke to last week, he said to me, there has to be a paradigm shift. We have to have a massive paradigm shift of good, from bad going over to good. We have to now hail good.
Well, that will only happen when people wake up.
Yeah.
Once they wake up and see it for what it is. Stop idolizing these people. They are not God.
No.
Don't idolize them. Do not be afraid of them. And I'll speak to anyone who's a survivor. Anyone who abused you is a coward. They're a bully. They picked on a vulnerable, frightened child. They are cowards.
Yeah.
They are cowards. I sat in on a meeting of people that had a pro-satanic agenda. I went covertly, and it was a talk in London, and they were attacking me. Funny enough, I was subject of part of their presentation. It was an anti-Trump, anti-Pizzagate, anti-satanic ritual abuse, satanic panic, pro-satanic panic thing, and it was run by this journalist, Dr. Rosie Waterhouse, this so-called bastion of professional journalism, right? And she had a very, in my opinion, very pro-satanic agenda. Anyway, she was attacking me, and I looked around at the people that went to really blow smoke up her ass in this room, that agreed with what she was saying. And one of them, he's like I think he's something to do with, there's a group called the Fortean Society. And he stood up and said, we all know that children lie. So survivors of abuse, have a look at the Fortean Society, because their main guy says you're all liars. And backed up by Rosie Waterhouse. And I looked at them all, they were weak people. They were freaks. They were weirdos. They weren't like us. These were weird, these were dogs. So do not be frightened of them, because when they did it to you, you was a child. You had no choice. They had a choice and they chose to do it, but they're weak and they're cowards. Do not be frightened of them. And that's my parting message, really. I'm going to have to sort of...
No, man. I know. I wanted to always, like I say, mate, it's very dark, and fair play to you for doing what you're doing. But I mean, you must have desensitised yourself massively to this.
Yeah, but look, going on about the paradigm shift, bring it on. And let's bring about some healing. And it's a bit like an addiction. You've got to face up to yourself and what you've been through. You've got to go through that pain, and then the change comes about. Knocking in the alcohol on the head, the drugs on the head. You do go through, the shakes and everything else, but you'll get there.
Yeah. I wanted to, just before we go, I did want to touch on, because everybody says this stuff's conspiracy theory and all that crap. I think everything's kind of interlinked to what the world's going to. Can you see what I'm seeing regarding they want total control, they want to dumb us down, they want complete and utter... I mean, I'm going through London just now, mate. My God, 20 mile an hour speed limits everywhere, cameras everywhere. Can you see what is going on? I mean, I feel that this is...
And what it does, it builds frustration in you. And not only that now, the prices of running a car are so expensive. They're pushing these electric cars, that agenda. These electric, you can do 40 miles an hour on an electric bike, but you can only do 20 miles an hour in a car. They desperately want us out of cars. They don't want us in homes. They don't want us owning nothing. They're pushing it so much that we will end up with nothing.
Yeah, they tell us that. They say you'll own nothing and be happy about it. And
it's happening.
Yeah,
it's happening. Yeah. It's going to happen in our lifetime. We're going to see it.
But how does it change, John?
Well, we've got to wake up and we've got to stand up and do what's right. And we don't go to war. If we go to war, our young men die. We don't go to war. We wake up. We look, men, stop leaving children, right? Stop leaving children. Women, stop having kids with every idiot going. Stop it. Build your family strong. Right? Grow your own vegetables, go for walks, love each other, care for each other morally and emotionally, make strong people. Otherwise, when you're broken, you are fodder to the agenda. You have to then acquiesce. Then the social services intervene. Your kids go into foster care, they get abused, they don't get love they should get, and they just become broken, angry people, and that just feeds the system even more. Take an interest in geopolitics. Start looking at the news. Start taking an interest in it, and start seeing. But stop idolizing. Stop the idolatry. For me, if anyone wants any advice from me, follow Jesus. He's the way, the truth, and the light. He warned us about all of this, and know that the devil's real, because he's after your soul. And wake up. This isn't a joke, and it isn't a game. And stop following these stupid influencers, these girls that want to shag 1,000 people and blokes that want to shove loads of cakes in their mouths. And stop it. And we can bring it back.
Yeah, definitely, John. Well, look, like I said, this was very last minute. I bumped into you in a garage last night. It's been a fantastic chat. It's really dark, mate. It really is. But look, I say it, mate. Bring the noise. We've all got to bring the noise together and come together as a collective. Hopefully my cause, your cause, all causes of evil can all come together and, change it to good, mate.
As the saying goes, in the words of Edmund Burke, in order for the triumph of evil, it takes but for good men to do nothing. It's so simple. Do something. If you do nothing, evil does what it wants. Let's start saying no. Start saying no to these people. And when there are these rallies and these marches, turn up in your millions, turn up, bring the pain to them and say, we are not tolerating it. Things like the Southport, when there was a thing, everyone go to it and start telling your MP, you're going to lobby against this. Otherwise, we're going to have no confidence you and get you out of here. And let's sign up and get Starmer out, get him out.
Do it with love and peace, butter.
Yeah, and that's what you do. Well, look, if we love our children, we go out of our way to protect our children.
Protect all children, mate.
Fight the good fight.
Protect all children. But look, John, I really appreciate it, mate. and God bless.
God bless you, my brother. God bless. Let's do it.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.